Right, well, here we are. It's Sunday, October 21st, 2018. I'm Matt Lina, and we're here to call some sacred cows, or maybe just to hang out for a little while. I'm going to wait here for a little while until other people show up for the stream, and hopefully we'll be able to have a good time together. At least I'm looking forward to it. So I think I'm going to need to find a way of switching my account so I can actually read the chat. So while I'm in the middle of doing this, hope you guys can enjoy the music. Alright, it says that we've been streaming now for more than 11 seconds, so this is working nicely. Ah, the music is a bit loud. Thanks for the heads up. I have the music down at 3% of its original volume, but we'll see what happens if we turn it down even further. Mind giving some feedback now as to whether this is working or not, or if it's any better, or if I still need to go and do something else. We'll see how that works. It might also be that my voice is just proportionately quieter since I've gotten a new mic, and we wind up having to turn the volume up way higher to hear my voice. I've turned the gain on my mic up as far as it goes, so that I don't know if there's anything more to be done in that regard. Or maybe, I don't know, hopefully that improves things. Let's see if that improves anything. Should at least give us another few decibels. All right. So I see Henrik is here. Thank you for the feedback about the volume. This is about the best that it's going to get. I literally the resolution for turning the volume down is such that I can't. It's either going to be this or no music. Now, of course, if no music is the only other alternative, I'll be happy to shut off the music. Just let me know. Just let me know how the settings are. Okay. Seems good to me. Got it. So I was thinking of reading a few pieces that I had bookmarked on Quora and just giving a bit of an opinion on them. Because there was a pretty nice one about how to change people's minds. It was written by Hector Quintanilla, and I'll put it into the chat for you guys. Oh, the white noise from my microphone sounds like a field recording of a waterfall. Oh no. I was wondering if that has anything to do with the fact that my wife was running water, or if it's actually something else. By the way, we're reading Hector Quintanilla's answer about the most effective way to change someone's mind, and I'll give you the link over here. And if there is something else that I can do, I will. I'll do my best to make the noise quality, or the sound. Sorry, the sound quality. The sound. Here, my wife is laughing at me. I'll do my best to make the sound quality better. but I'm going to just let you know that it's going to be a work in progress. The answer, or the question is, what is the most effective way to change someone's mind? And my daughter says, he's telling a story. Oh no, this place smells terrible, Mom. I can't stand it. Let's get out of here. My mom ignored me. I couldn't believe people worked around such a terrible smell. I approached the man working there and asked, Sir, are you selling any rotten fish? Your market smells terrible. No, son. We sell the best fish in town. To me, this place smells like flowers, the old man told me. I turned to my mother with eyes of disbelief while holding my nose to prevent any smelling, and said with a muffled tone, Did you hear what he just said? I did. He's been here for so long that he doesn't even notice the fishy smell. This also happens to our brains. When our brains live in toxic environments, it's impossible for us to understand the mess we live in. So to answer your question, what's the most effective way to change someone's mind? Get them out of the fish market. How can we change someone if they can't see what needs to be changed? To change someone's mind, start by encouraging them to start living their own convictions and help them stop being people pleasers. Warning, if you're dealing with stubborn or prideful people, move on. You're wasting your time. So I thought that was kind of a useful piece, especially given the consideration that he gives to the environment and to the people's preconceptions and surroundings and so on. I just said environment and surroundings, and I was going to say milieu as well, but I think that would be overdoing it in terms of synonyms. But I think it would really behoove us to encourage people to get out of the fish market. If there is something toxic, gentle encouragement in the right direction, or providing people the opportunity to, in a fun, playful way, extricate themselves from crap, can be just the ticket. You smell Oscar. You mean like the Oscar the Grouch, the little green dude that lives in the garbage can? Okay. So getting people out of that comfortable, nasty place. In other words, that place where everything is comfortable because it's familiar, but it happens to be familiar suffering, familiar trouble, familiar problems, familiar things that on the whole aren't necessarily as good as they could be. Although, granted, things could always be worse. But that are generally on the whole by acting? I'm acting? What in the world are you talking about? Because I've noticed that, well, I'll tell you a story of my own. There was somebody, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but somebody that I care for very deeply. Someone who mattered very much to me. And I knew that he was motivated, he was driven, he was an immensely caring person. I thought and still do. Oh, my acting would give me these sticks. Yeah, he's a very good friend to this day. But back in late 2009, I knew him from around here. I knew him from around here. He cared very much for other people. It was abundantly obvious that there was an awful lot going on beneath the surface, and yet he happened to be a fun guy that often put forward a carefree side. But he grew up with a bunch of preconceptions that living in Finland would give, and so I invited him, and paid his way. I mean, I wasn't rolling in money at that point. I was a college student working at a grocery store. But it's one of those things that when you see something, and I'm not saying this in order to get any kind of please don't go and do this whole thing where you give people kudos based upon these things. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because it's a question of putting your money where your mouth is. I invited him, and I knew that I was guessing that he probably didn't have enough money saved up to have a big vacation or something. And so I invited him over. I was still living with my parents at that point, and got their permission, of course, and I paid for his plane ticket. I paid for him to do some things that he really enjoyed. This guy really enjoyed soccer, so I paid for him to go and attend a soccer camp, and mostly we just hung out and had a good time, and we just talked about important things. And I did this knowing that regardless of what happens, him being out of the fish market, him getting a chance to go and live somewhere else and see something else would be good for him, because it would perhaps stir within him what I already knew to be a desire to go out and make what he wanted out of life. And I don't want to take too much credit, because he's a very special man, and he would, of course, be a success with or without me in his life. But it was important to me that to do that, just so that he would have the opportunity to at least see something different. And then it came to light 6 years later that I was actually doing it for the purpose of seeing him flourish. He said that it was a very important trick for him, and it accomplished its intended goal. I mean, he didn't know what the intended goal was, but when he gave a bit of feedback, he said, yeah, I remember that trip and all these different things that we talked about and things that we thought about and so on. And sometimes it takes planting that seed, just a very little seed, like the seed, like a mustard seed, a very, very small thing you can barely see. And sometimes it'll grow into something big. And sometimes it'll be a flop. But such is the nature of any investment. An investment is a risk. But putting your neck out on the line and allowing people into your life and sharing who you are and what matters to you in a non-hostile environment can be all the difference in between having a positive impact on somebody and having your ideas fall on deaf ears, or even worse, be horribly reacted to and have you be portrayed as a demon for even suggesting certain things. Now, people won't notice the smell of fish unless they come in from the smell of something else. So if you give people the opportunity to have some fresh air, and hopefully, to the best of your ability, and the best of my ability, and anybody else's ability, make your own presence wherever you happen to be, but especially your own domicile, the place over which you have control, where you rest, where you sleep, where you eat and do things, if you make that kind of place safe. And I don't mean these idiot safe spaces that pop up on university campuses. I mean really safe spaces. I mean places where people can not be afraid to bring up any topic, where there really is nothing taboo, where they can go and say something that might cut down my core worldview, or I could say something that might cut down their core worldview, but there's still an element of mutual respect and of mutual caring and of actually trying to make things good for one another. I think that it's very important that we figure out what kind of an environment we want to be in and what kind of signals we want to send out to the people around us in terms of, whether it's a beacon of, hey, like-minded folk or non-like-minded folk, come here, at least we can come and reason together. Or whether it be, hey, I just need to rest. I just need a little R&R, and you're welcome to join me. Our topic might go wherever, we might talk about different things, or we might just spend an evening in complete silence, but welcome. Making sure that people's fundamental needs are met is exceedingly important. Speaking of, I got a message from somebody else who I care about very deeply. Perhaps he will, perhaps he'll join in. Perhaps he won't. I don't know if he's in a position of being able to do that right now. He's celebrating Mother's Day. It's interesting. I didn't know that Mother's Day was celebrated in October in Argentina, but I guess we learn all sorts of new things. But speaking of this whole safe environment, I really appreciate being able to have people from all over the world here on interacting in the stream chat and in doing other things. Being able to correspond with people on Quora, being able to interact via the internet, because this is something even our parents' generation, or at least my parents' generation, didn't get to experience at this particular stage in their lives. Or if they did, it wasn't anywhere near as good of internet connection and so on. Nowhere near as good of resolution in terms of the video and all the technological capabilities. Which is another thing about having the right kind of an environment around you, is if you have the environment of seeking opportunities and making the most of whatever the environment happens to be, a can-do attitude rather than a can't-do attitude, you can accomplish great things and drag other people along with you, or motivate other people along to run with you, or sometimes drag people kicking and screaming through the initial stages, and then after that, have a pleasant time. Oh, hello. Welcome to the stream. It's good to see you. We were just in the process of talking about the environment, and I don't know if you're able to see the Quora answer that I linked. If you want to open that in a new tab, it was a piece by Hector Quintanilla. And the stuff that Hector puts out are not particularly technical, and being a technical person myself, I find that kind of stuff easier to digest, but he does a wonderful job of distilling truth and then giving an exposition in a story. And he's gone through enough life and remembers enough things in enough detail to be able to provide a wonderful example for the people reading his answers. So if you're on Quora, I highly recommend following him. There's an ever increasing group of people that I think are definitely worth following, reading their stuff. And I would also encourage you that in life in general, in person, try surrounding yourselves. Just think about what happens if you surround yourself with the kind of people that you want to be like. If you surround yourself with your role models, you surround yourself with the people that you want to be your peers, that can be game changing. And a lot of the time, we don't have the right kinds of people right around us. But we still can seek them out. We still can seek them out, and it's actually pretty amazing how willing people are to work with sincere, driven, caring, value-producing people. And it's amazing the things that you can get sometimes if you ask. Certainly the answer, you always risk there being a no for the answer. But you can get all sorts of things if you just ask. For instance, another instance of just asking. And I can go ahead and tell you that Steven Stutz, Caleb Beers, and I are in the process of putting together a few, multiple hundreds actually, of videos with the intention that we will teach what amounts to basic math. And by basic math, I actually mean algebra, calculus, and differential equations. So basically the stuff that engineers need. Or if you're going into a field like medicine, you don't have to, I suppose, go to differential equations, though I'd say that it would be useful for you as any kind of a scientist. As a mathematician, of course, there's an awful lot more heavy stuff you can go into than that, but just dealing with these particular things with pretty concrete applications will be very useful for many people, especially in the information age, where a lot of things are going to be modeled, a lot of things are modeled, and having an understanding of what goes into the mathematics of modeling things, and the mathematics of designing things, and the mathematics of understanding the controllable elements of the world, or at least a gigantic subset of them, will be very important. How much will it cost us? Well, this particular repository, Algebra, Calculus, Algebra Calc 1, 2, 3, and IfEQ, is going to be available for free on YouTube. It's going to be, I was able to get permission from the guy who we came up with Paul's online math notes to make expositions and lessons about all of them, as long as I link to and as long as they are free, and as long as I link to and credit him in the description. And so we are taking Paul's online math notes and putting them into a form that doesn't require only reading through it, but will be a little bit more interactive in terms of we, when making the videos, are proactively thinking about the kinds of questions people have and answering them. And then if there's any topic that you're interested in, and of course we're not done with the entire repository, but we're going to be modifying it. We're going to be linking in between the videos and saying, okay, if you have trouble with this one, then go back to these ones, and if you want to jump ahead to this one and do that, and trying to make it as easily navigable as possible. Quite likely we're going to need to also have a companion website to go with it, and then after going through the basic math, we might wind up doing some other things that will monetize or make people pay for, because we were able to get the opportunity to make these things based upon a set of notes that are under copyright, but Paul has so graciously decided to let us make it into a resource. But there are some other things that will cost us a pretty penny, and then we'll either charge for them or crowdsource it or something, just in order to be able to pay for the man hours and the books and so on that it takes to put things together, as well as the rights to the material. And we could also potentially make that for free if we wind up getting enough people willing to sponsor it. But those kinds of things don't happen if you don't go and send the email, if you don't go and knock on the door, if you don't go and write the letter, if you don't go and make the phone call. And especially being on the fence in terms of the kinds of traits that I personally have, going and reaching out to other people has been especially difficult for me. I, first off, am a perfectionist, and I want to make sure that the face that I put forward is perfect, or at least is professional, well put together, respectable. And often I found myself shooting myself in the foot in terms of making myself less accessible and less human. But over the course of many mistakes and over the course of much struggling through it, I've forced myself to go from somebody that barely says anything to someone that barely says anything but can switch on a social mode that exists for as long as I need to interact with people. And I keep on trying to calibrate it or think about, okay, how do I convey the most respect to the people around me? How do I go and make sure the needs of the people around me are being met? And how do I encourage other people to help me along with my goals? And a lot of the time it just is simple pathos, ethos, and logos. I've had people, having people say no is not at all foreign to me. People say no to me all the time, and sometimes it's because I present my things poorly, and other times it's because they just don't want to have anything to do with it. But going through the... I'll read what Collins has to say. People usually talk about discussing with those who make you mad for some reason, quite like closure. It's usually family, so you have someone who wants to leave, but of others disagreeing thoughts. I will give you my thoughts as soon as I'm done finishing this. And Harry's asking, how do you seem more human to people? And I'll actually answer both of these questions as soon as I'm done with this particular thought, which won't take more than maybe another minute or two to close. Or actually, I can jump straight into it. There's a book, I can't think of who the author is right now, but it's entitled Nonviolent Communication. And whereas I don't agree with everything the author says, I think that he makes incredibly good points as to how we as human beings are wired, and makes a very compelling case for a particular way of communicating our needs to other people. One of the biggest things that I've found, though, is that it necessitates vulnerability, which touches on both Colin's and Harry's points. We have largely been led to believe, and I would say especially due to a westernized school system, or especially one predicated upon basically the authoritarian German system of the 19th century, and advocated for by Fichte, to hold ourselves to high standards. And I think that high standards are great, but I don't think that they need to exist outside of, or rather, I don't think they should alienate us from other people. Because a lot of the times, what happens to high achievers is the high achievers will get focused on achieving without being too cognizant of how other people fit into their goals. So certainly you can be a high achiever and you can be antisocial. I don't mean ASPD, I mean just antisocial. And you can get pretty far, but there still are some social skills that are necessary. And if you're capable of helping other people get their needs met as well as meeting your own, you're going to get a lot less resistance. Now, I'm saying this also because I have a lot to learn myself. I'm in no way anywhere near perfect at this, but I found these strategies for interpersonal interaction to be quite useful for me. So the strategy is very simple, that you talk about very concrete observations in a things happen very close to now time frame. Of course, if it is relevant, if the past is relevant, I suppose you can bring it up. But let's take, for instance, just the family situation. Is keeping your head down a good strategy? I don't think so. In some certain, I can't just go and say a blanket statement, keeping your head down is a good thing. Keeping your head down might work some of the time, but I think that if you keep your head down for too long, you can weaken yourself. I found myself that when I've kept my head down and when I've just done my own thing and I only had my nose to the grindstone and haven't attempted, at least, to get the kind of life and surroundings I've wanted, I've become very resentful. And then I've almost used the bitterness as fuel for even higher performance, which causes people to resent you even more, which causes me to resent them even more. And it just turns into a nasty cycle where you keep on trying to prove yourself more and more and more and more and more. And people start hating you more and more and more and more and more because you become less and less and less accessible. But the key is to express your needs in such a way that doesn't trigger their threats or their threat radar, or even if it does, that it ameliorates the situation quite a bit. which is why certain types of people are very good at this, because it involves dealing with things very directly. But it also involves refraining from stating judgments. If somebody does something hurtful to me, let's say somebody says something hurtful to me, I could flat out say, "What's wrong with you? Why did you say that?" But what's wrong with you and that? Even though people are fully aware of what they said, they'll immediately become reactionary to what it is that you brought up, because you brought up something that was essentially one of their inadequacies. And they're going to be less likely to attempt to rectify the situation, because you've now threatened them in the way that you've gone and basically said, "Hey, I'm not going to validate you." And people can easily take that sort of thing personally. So what's suggested is you say the exact thing. Let's say somebody went and said, I'll take a case and I'll eliminate the name from it. Let's say somebody blames you for something that went wrong, when it was not necessarily your fault. You may have been able to act differently, but given the set of circumstances, you were pretty well tied into doing what it is you had to do in order to live congruent with your value system. And failures in communication happen. Like there's all sorts of explanations for why things can happen. But if somebody just goes and flat out starts whining at you because of something that they perceive you did wrong that you don't see as being wrong, you can say, "You said such and such to me." Then step number 2, you say how that made you feel, and that doesn't mean like that made me feel like you don't think. No, that's a thought, and you state very clearly what the feeling happens to be. And there are all sorts of charts and things of that nature that make this easier. One of which I can actually see. I don't have the book with me, but I can link a picture for you. I think this is it. And here's a good one. This isn't too bad of one. And neither is this one. This one is also a good one. I had too long ago. I couldn't even get that one to go. But that one particular feelings wheel should be enough for the purposes. And if you need to have more specific vocabulary, but the thing is that the feeling needs to be an actual feeling, and it needs to be yours. It needs something you can own and say, "I feel this. I feel threatened by this," or "I feel concerned," and concerned. And then you can say, this came across to me as, but you start with the emotion, "I am concerned. This came across to me as you prioritizing this over someone else's life or limb or or someone else's property or whatever. And then you state what need it is that you have. Like and it might come across better to say, okay, you said this, I felt concerned. My need in this particular scenario was to preserve somebody else's property, and so I ran and left things with not more than a couple words because time was of the essence, and so on. And then you can make a concrete request. Would you please refrain from making such statements until you have all the facts? Or would you please engage in these nonviolent communication strategies with me? And you always frame it in the form of a request. And if people do not acquiesce to your request, then you use these same principles turned the other way to figure out why they're disinclined to acquiesce to your request. And make the whole conversation about finding what people's real needs are and getting them fulfilled in as much as absolutely possible. And that involves a great amount of vulnerability. That involves a great amount of patience, and certainly doesn't involve keeping one's head down. In fact, it's a huge risk. And it involves often, especially if you're the kind of a person who is more straight-spoken or less emotional, who seems to have it together, that you have to enter the emotional maelstrom somebody else has. If someone else construes such a request as domineering, well, Harry, could you please explain that a little bit more? Like, if you say, would you... Man, I mean, that's tough. But if somebody construes it as domineering, you can say, okay, well, obviously, if somebody says that, then that means they're either A, trying to bully you, or B, they actually have a need. And maybe bullying is the only way they found out works to get their need, because they just scare other people by becoming domineering themselves, by accusing people of being domineering. And what I would do in that situation, oh, you're trying to control me, oh, you're trying to dominate me, oh, you just want to be in control of the whole conversation. Well, I have a need for peace. I don't want my environment to feel like a war zone. And right now I'm feeling very anxious, or right now I'm feeling concerned, or right now I'm feeling angry. And I don't want the conversation to devolve. I want us both to be able to be respected. I want us both to feel respected and cared for. My goal, however poorly I may have gone across it, is not to dominate. It's not to be domineering. But I do have a need for a mutually respectful environment, and I'm hoping that you'd be willing to work with me to achieve it. Are you and what I need you to do is tell me, are you willing to work with me and to figure out what needs to be done? Fact-resistant people are difficult, but sometimes I think that if we break things down in terms of emotional needs, even if they are very basic, or there is no objective reality, people, ugh, yuck. Well, I mean, I suppose if somebody says there is no objective reality, well, I assume then you won't care if I smash you in the face. If there is no objective reality, then clearly this fist meeting your nose isn't a problem. I mean, if you can do it in a funny way, then sure. But those kinds of people, you can say, well, you don't need to engage them on that at that particular point. Well, they go deaf probably because they don't feel like their needs are being met. And whatever their stupid needs might be, and they are probably stupid, but then so are our needs. They're pretty stupid. I'll admit that my needs are pretty stupid. I mean, like, why would I want emotional peace when really that's not a threat to life or limb? Is that might be an unreasonable expectation, but you can still frame it as a need, because or at least a strong desire. And once the subject of the conversation becomes about tangible actions one can undertake in order to help other people get their needs, without these tangible actions being somehow counterproductive to my own or your own well-being, it's possible to make headway, however slow. In fact, I'd say that once people's actual needs are revealed, it doesn't take very long to come to mutually agreeable conclusions. And then you can reiterate and retry and just keep on moving forward with life. It involves a great deal of being willing to deal with unreasonable people and keeping it cool, because you're the one that has the goal, you're the one with the plan, you're the one that has your stuff together, and so you are the one that bears most of the responsibility, at least if you have a way that you want to see things to be. Lots of people are just on emotional autopilot. Lots of people just bite down on the first thing that sounds good to them, and then they construct a worldview around a load of turds. I mean, then there's nothing you can really do about it, except for peel back the layers, or sometimes go straight to the core and figure out what their core needs are and why it is that ascertain for yourself why it is they've adopted some of these maladaptive positions. I'm not saying that it's easy. Far from it. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. But it's, I dare say, making a little progress and having it be, a big deal. At least I consider that better than being right, being vindicated, but still not in the end having what you want. But I have to say, hanging on to being vindicated and being bitter is often a very easy thing to do, especially for me. It's a lot easier for me to say, well, look, this person's just being a moron, this person's just being stupid. This person doesn't even deserve me talking to him because he's just being so blatantly illogical that there's no common ground. And that's self-righteous and kind of bad on my part. Or at least it's, if I don't want to be too judgmental of my own self, I would say that it's probably counterproductive, because we all do have human needs. We are all human beings. And maybe I can turn other people to my way of thinking by giving them enough compassion, enough empathy, enough breathing room to be able to get rid of whatever baggage is preventing them from constructively interacting with other people. Like, the whole point of this interactive style isn't being weak. The point of it is ridding oneself and those around from the baggage that prevents people from finding win-win situations. Think about an abusive father or something, someone who beats his children. He clearly thinks that beating his children is the only way of getting what he wants, and however wrong he may be, he believes that, and he's going to continue beating his children until he sees another way. And the only way he's ever going to see another way is if you work with him to learn. I mean, he's either going to have it beaten out of him, which, I wouldn't mind seeing necessarily. I mean, I think there's definitely a place for the Lex Talionis brand of justice. But if you're in a position where there might not be so much recourse, you're left with the box of tools that you have, and maybe the best way is to, obviously, you get the kids that are being abused out of there, but when the person is serving a sentence, or when the person is going through all this stuff, to make sure that when he gets back out into the real world, he doesn't go and start doing the same stuff all over again. I mean, recidivism is horrible, and recidivism is a big thing. And so there need to be more constructive ways of dealing with people, and so you can use constructive ways of bringing more constructive ways to other people to help them function better. And yeah, it's a great amount of effort. And there's no guarantee it's just going to work with anybody, but at least you can go forward with your own life knowing that you have made every effort. And in terms of bringing value to other people, and in terms of making sure their emotional needs are filled, regardless of how reprehensible you think this person is, they'll be more inclined to listen to you. But people won't listen to you if they don't perceive you as definitely trustworthy. So knowing that it's in their best interest to listen to you, and if they don't respect you. So the best way that I know of demonstrating trustworthiness, aside from outside reputation, is just by having people know that you have their best interest at heart. It's the difference in between people that are perceived as cold and people that are perceived as warm. People that are perceived as, like, you could have warm and calculating, or cold and calculating. And the warm and calculating person is trusted by many. The cold and calculating person is the one people hold at arm's length and don't want to trust with anything. And so this soft skill tends to be important, but you can still be direct, because the very first step you state, you said this, or you extricate parent from child, I see you beating your child. Stop. First off, no. Second off, then you can go and say, no, I have a need for harmony. And seeing and justice, and seeing someone 4 times the size of someone else beating him is definitely not doing it for me. I'm horribly angry. I see this. I'm horribly angry seeing this happen. I perceive this as injustice, and I need you to stop beating. Well, I'm not gonna. He's being this. He's doing that. He's doing. And then you can go and use that as an opportunity of teaching them to resolve their differences in some other way. Not after maybe 20, 30 minutes. 2 or 3 hours or whatever, their lives can be changed. Now, of course, you can't just go and interject yourself in every other situation, but if you're in a situation with people that you're stuck, if you're in a situation with family, a lot of what they've learned in terms of dealing with other people is habit. And if you need to be person engaged in the cranial-anal extraction procedure by consistently and patiently applying the principles of communicating in a nonviolent way, well, what do you want? Do you want a peaceful environment badly enough to do it? Do you want people behaving respectfully bad enough to do it? Does it matter to you enough? And if it does, well, then you're going to be taking the necessary steps to show people another way and to gently guide them into doing it every single time they fall back to old habits. Harry, you say, interesting. On a tangential note, sometimes people talk about punishment for ill deeds as if it had some intrinsic value, a justice perhaps over the practical aspects of it. Is this legitimate? I'd say yes. I'd say the principle of lex talionis is certainly more just than what preceded it, which was that of over a slight or something, life for a slight. You can see that today in terms of road rage or bard fights, where one person says, well, let's say one person cuts somebody else off, and then another person chases him down in traffic and then shoots him dead. It's very rare, but bar fights, that happens a lot more. Like one person says something or tries to pick up somebody's wife, and then the other person, who's also inebriated, goes and swings a beer bottle, and oops, the beer bottle connected too well, and the other person is now dead. So that sort of a thing can take place. So lex talionis, like the principle of an eye for an eye, is oftentimes it helps to quell people's rage because it sets a limit to how far one is willing to go in terms of revenge or justice. And there's also a point for revenge. One is the deterring factor, so that other people go and see that this kind of behavior isn't tolerated. That's why I'm a proponent of, say, the death penalty. I'm a proponent of the death penalty, even though I think that is cruel and should. I think that life in prison is way more cruel, but I think that death. I mean, obviously, you don't inflict death lightly. But if somebody else has killed someone else, and it can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it's been egregious enough, or whatever the terms might be, then I would say, have a public hanging. have a public hanging and let everyone see this is what we do to people who kill. It serves as an example, and other people, if they start thinking, well, I'm going to kill someone, well, is it worth it? Even if only 20% of killers get killed, for instance, there's a 1 in 5 chance that I'm going to get strung up if I follow through on this. And these sorts of things are very visceral, and we human beings mostly are risk-averse creatures. So that's so I would say that punitive justice certainly has its place, both in terms of satisfying the internal need for justice without going overboard, and of having a clear example of this is what happens to you if you do, I would say, theft. You don't kill people for stealing, but theft, fraud, murder, rape, slavery, things of that nature. Hello, Mr. Sanderson. That things that are actually violations of other people's rights should be certainly punished with appropriate severity and celerity. I'm mumbling? Oh no. I'm sorry. I'm attempting to answer Mr. Holman's questions. Do I think the Constitution characterizes its culture? I'm not sure I understand the question. I don't. I'm not sure, because that's such a very deep and broad question. Would you mind narrowing it down a little bit, or giving an example of what it is you're trying to ask, Mr. Fulcher? I'm really not sure. Either way, I'll let you guys know that we're about 12 minutes away from the stream ending, so we'll try to take this particular topic of punitive justice and perhaps about the Constitution characterizing its culture, and come at least to some suitable stopping point before next time. Because I think it's interesting that we can analyze justice. We can go and we think, well, is this just? Is that just? Is whatever just? Oh no! Crud! No! No, the mic's the problem. The mic shouldn't be the problem. It's a new mic. Oh, but it has a poor interaction with. Hey, is this any better? Is this working now? We'll see if that helps. If we have a violent constitution... Oh, I thought you were talking about the Constitution, like not a constitution of a person. Okay. Do you think a violent reaction on the part of the government will cause violence to be closer to the norm? Okay. Yeah, for some reason, I think I had the mic turned off here here. Okay. So If we have a violent constitution, do I think that a violent reaction on the part of the government will cause violence to be closer to the norm? It depends. It very much depends. I'm thinking there are lots of situations where the government doesn't need to get involved unless it gets out of hand. You know, I'm perfectly fine with kids taking justice into their own hands. That if a bully goes and tries to bully somebody, if he gets a thrashing, that's perfectly fine. But let's say in the case of theft. Okay, so if someone steals from me and he's willing to make amends, I would be okay with not calling the police. You know, and letting him make amends on terms that are agreeable to both of us. Like, I'm all for trying to solve things first. Even if a loved one of mine is murdered and I can somehow have a guarantee that the murderer is going to at least attempt recompense, I'm not going to necessarily even want the guy to be locked up for life or to die. But if there's no hope for this person or whatever, then sure. Sure. And if it's incredibly egregious or violent or nasty, then yeah, I definitely think he should be paying. But the question ultimately winds up being is what's fair. And I think that if fairness, meaning actual justice, is the norm, like nobody engaging in anything disproportionate, nobody engaging in anything stupid, then I don't think that things will escalate out of proportion. But I also think that it involves having an appropriate attitude, and a belief that I can't just go out and kill somebody, or I can't just go out and steal, or I can't just go out and defraud. Having an understanding that these basic things are wrong. I can't just go out and make somebody a slave. I'd say that most of it's contingent upon moral education. And so most of it's learned at home. Most of the moral compass is learned at home, and what little isn't is learned during the formative years, and is very, very difficult to change after that. How do I reliably tell if they're not making amends merely as an escape attempt? Well, I can even use the nonviolent communication strategy, right? I can say, well, look, I'm skeptical. I'm very skeptical. I need assurance that you're not going to bail. I need assurance that you're not going to do this. I need you to tell me what you're going, would you please tell me what you're going to do to ensure to me that you're going to make recompense? And we just keep on hammering that point until I am satisfied. Keep on hammering that point until I am satisfied that he will make recompense. So how do I reliably tell? I don't know. I think it's contingent upon the situation. And if the only way to have somebody make recompense is to lock them up until he does, then sure. But I think that simply having a GPS tracker on on somebody and me having the other end of the GPS, so that I know this other person isn't going to be escaping or whatever, that would be enough for me. And certainly whatever it is, I'd have a probably a better shot at actually getting real recompense for this guy than I would for sending him to jail if he were a thief or something. You know, if he makes an agreement with me, hey, I stole $1,000 worth of stuff, I'll give you $200 out of my next 5 paychecks, or say even $200 out of the next. You know, ancient codes often would say 4 times as much. So $200 out of the next 20 paychecks. So somewhere in that range. You know, basically you think about the lost utility that I could have had for my $1,000 at the time that it was gone, plus interest and so on, and then we'll just find something that's manageable and write it out as a contract that he's going to make amends to me for the amount of $4,000 according to a certain schedule with certain penalties in place, and you just write out the contract like you would any other contract, and move forward. Do I feel they need to do it out of guilt rather than thinking that this will benefit them by me not calling the police? Well, here's the thing. I don't want to completely ruin the life of the thief. Even if the person steals from me, I don't want to ruin his life. I mean, obviously, I can go and tell people, hey, this person stole, be careful. But I think that, you know, making amends is enough. You know, simple understanding of, hey, this is wrong. Like, what does feeling guilty mean? Does that mean acting bashful around somebody? I mean, does it mean being, every single time he sees me, feeling horrible about himself? I mean, that would potentially be counterproductive to the goal. Not really possible, though, on a large scale. Well, that's another reason that I believe that a lot of what needs to be, a lot of what's done on the federal scale could easily be accomplished on the state and local scale. And a lot of what the government does isn't necessarily under the domain of the government. I'm thinking that there's this gray area. Yeah, a change of ethics on their part, certainly. And, you know, if somebody stole me, I'd be like, hey, you're coming to Bible studies with me for 2 years or something. I don't know. But, or you're going to go and take like 4 philosophy ethics classes at the university, or philosophy of ethics classes at the university or something. Or even something as simple as you're going to eat dinner with us every night, or say twice a week for a year, 104 dinners with us. And we're going to talk about hard things. We already have hard conversations around the dinner table. Why not have a conversation with somebody that's stolen? Yeah, you have a dinner idea, and then paying back for whatever they've stolen. The only systemic treatment that I see, and if you mean by systemic, you mean having absolutely normalized to every single individual, the only systemic treatment that I think is actually working is a gas chamber of bullets. You can't formalize morality teaching. If the last 7 decades, or closer to 9 decades, that we've experienced as mankind has taught us anything, you can't count on institutions to teach morality. The only thing institutions are good for is the punitive aspect. And if parents aren't going to make the effort in the beginning, then we either need to be completely willing as a society just to lock them up and consider them hopeless, or to take the initiative ourselves. Morality and legality are separate. But are you saying that, okay, what should happen to me? So let's say somebody steals from me. Let's say this whole thief thing happens and somebody steals, I don't know, $1,000 worth of electronics or something. I catch him and we agree that he's going to pay me $4,000 back and eat dinner at our house 2 nights a week for a year. Would you say there's anything wrong with that? Should somebody force me instead to report him to the police and not make that deal just between the two of us? Well, the problems regarding institutions are Dunbar's number. Namely that we cannot, it is not possible for us to care as human beings at an appropriate level for more than about 148 other people. And the psychology of a crowd is very different from the psychology of an individual. And when you have decision makers far separate from the ones who are impacted by the decision, then you wind up having a lack of empathy. But I just find it very difficult to believe that somehow, in the case of just say a petty thief, that I don't believe. I just do not believe that the government can actually fix the problem. The government can certainly help in terms of furnishing a place to lock criminals up, or what have you. The insurance of the legal system? So you're thinking about the system as it exists. I'm thinking about the system as I've designed it. I mean, of course I'm not going to poison the guy. I'm not going to do anything with that. And if I do, I should obviously be punished. No life for a life, probably. Because I would be disproportionate use of force against him in a situation where I wasn't even threatened. But in a society where any two people can actually make deals, which I think people should be allowed to consensually make deals, that particular issue shouldn't even be an issue. Now, of course, there's a big void in between what happens in reality and what would be nice in an ideal situation. But I think a lot of it would be fixed if people would just grow up. A lot of it would be fixed if people would just decide to act like responsible adults. I mean, I don't see this happening a century ago where somebody would. I mean, if we have a contract, if we have a contract between the two of us that says he's going to pay me $4,000 for dinner at our house 100 times in the next year, or 2 times a week or whatever, then then anything like that should be should be capable of being upheld in civil court. But I'm hoping that in most scenarios it wouldn't ever get to that point. I mean, I've had bad situations with other people, but I've more often than not, just due to the fact that however weird my online presence might be, or however I might come across over the internet, in person, I tend to get along with pretty much everybody except for the most ardent of leftists and people that are high on meth or craving heroin. Basically, there are very few people that I haven't been able to get along with just due to the way I present myself. And so I think that we should at least be allowed to sort things out ourselves first. We should be allowed to sort things out ourselves first, and ultimately, I think that if a lot of this could be sorted out at the very beginning stages, or the first time the kid steals a candy bar from the store. The first time somebody does something, the first time. And if the community involves itself, meaning, of course, the individuals that are involved. And if it's something as simple as, say a dollar candy bar for $4, and the kid doesn't have a job, and obviously you don't want the kid just to go ask his parent for $4, right? So you can be like, well, okay. And this is another thing that you should be able to make deals with people, that I will, instead of for $4, you can spend 1 hour with me at my store every Saturday morning for a month. We'll do a little work, but mostly we'll talk. Just make that kind of deal. Say this, if you do this, I won't go to the authorities. And I guarantee you that if more people did that, a lot of the evil that occurs could be stopped. But I think people are afraid of that vulnerability. They're afraid of actually making those connections, or they just don't feel like it's worth the time. But an entire culture that thinks that it's not worth the time to engage in moral education is when it's going to fall apart at the seams. Because ultimately the problem boils down to morality. And I would say, Mr. Hallman, that I believe that we are all horrible, but not unredeemable. I believe that there is something innately vicious in human nature. We all have a capacity for evil. And as long as even evil thoughts can go through our heads, that means that we are not 100% good. And because I define 100% good as good, that means even an infinitesimal amount less is, by definition, inadequate and therefore evil. If we use the ancient definition of sin, which is missing a mark, even a millimeter off of the bullseye, and you have sinned. Though I don't think that should change how we treat other people, or rather it should change how we treat everybody. We should understand that all of us have the capacity for tremendous evil. It's if Nazi Germany were to happen all over again, you and I would most likely be bystanders to the persecution of the Jews. If the Soviet Union were to happen all over again, you and I would most likely be bystanders. I'm not saying that all of us would be, but I am saying that we all have the capacity to be, and there's always some set of circumstances that could push us into doing things that we would otherwise say we wouldn't do. So yeah, I would say that innate evil exists, but we are redeemable. And we are certainly capable of doing good on a regular basis. Which is interesting because I think it's kind of funny how the Ten Commandments, for example, is a list of don'ts. If you take the first three away about God, well, I would say don't have any other gods. Remember the Sabbath. So that's actually a do. Don't take the name of God in vain. Remember the Sabbath. Okay, so those. But if we talk about how we deal with others, is honor your father and your mother. So don't despise them and don't provoke them and so on. Don't kill. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. Don't covet. And then don't covet in the sense that I want to sleep with this guy's wife, and don't covet in the sense that I want to steal his stuff. So it's almost that we acknowledge that in order to have a stable society, it's enough that people refrain from doing evil. Then I also think that when is the individual to blame rather than his name? I would say that an individual, I think that an individual is always to blame. If the goal is to play a blame game, I can think of very few situations of complete mental instability and incompetence that the individual wouldn't at least be bearing the lion's share of the blame. But I don't think that the blame game is necessarily the game we need to be playing when we're thinking about societies, because ultimately then you could go and say, well, the blame rests on everybody that fails to do the good that they could. Now, it's not only the evil that I would not that I do, but there is also the aspect of the good that I would that I do not. So certainly if a person winds up going from petty theft to becoming a murderer, takes a few leaps along the way of increasing the degree of the evil that he commits. I'm not going to say that the shopkeeper that didn't, give him the proverbial slap on the hand and 4 hours of Saturdays, you're going to come over here and help me, sweep the floor, and then we're going to have a cup of coffee and we're going to talk about things or whatever. I'm not going to say that he's at fault for the death of the person who just had the person killed, but at the same time, I'm going to say that a better question would be, what can we do in order to generate the world that we want to have? About blame. Okay, so I'm punishing someone. I'll finish this thought. That I think the blame sits on the people that actually directly conspired to commit the crime. I would say the people that conspired to commit the crime are guilty. At least from the perspective of rights. Like, who's infringing upon whose rights? If I sat down with somebody, so there's a difference as well. If I don't think I'm conspiring to commit a crime, yes, inactivity is punished. If, for instance, I don't feed my kids, I think that I should be punished for that. I would say that would be fair. But then again, I would go ahead and say, conspiracy to neglect someone. As I said, there's the evil that I would that I do not, or that I do. The evil that I would not, that I do. And the good that I would that I do not. Well, neglect is an instance of the good that I would that I do not. But at the same time, I don't think that the shop owner, going back to that situation, should have a legal obligation to take the little thief under his wing and try to teach him a better way of earning one's keep. But I'm also saying that would be deleterious in terms of if he actually wants to live in a good society, then that would inactivity that stems out of unconsciousness. Would you please give an example thereof? Inactivity that stems out of unconsciousness. I'd say that there are a lot of situations. I mean, okay, here's one. Okay, here's a good one. So let's say you are someone that cannot pay back a loan, but you go and you take that loan anyway. The terms of the loan basically state you have a certain amount of collateral. I'm thinking about the housing crisis of the late 2000s. So you take out a loan. Somebody else gives you a loan, but you take out a loan. And you don't really know, okay, can I pay this back? Can't I pay this back? Well, they say I can, so I'll just trust in, I'll take this loan out. Well, I would say that would be a, not paying back the loan. Well, you should have counted the cost. You should have counted the cost, because now you are in debt to somebody for whatever it is, the cost of a house or what have you. And of course, the settling of the loan, you get satisfaction if you obviously the bank repossesses the home, but then you declare bankruptcy because you legally can't pay the whole amount because the value of the home went down. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that I understand what you mean by that, because we have a little bit of a delay. So when you say, Mr. Fulcher, that sounds similar. to retaliation to a society which puts us in an unfortunate situation. It would be a useful practice to blame ourselves and take responsibility. I blame myself for everything that takes place in my surroundings, in the place where I have a reasonable ability to control things. But I think that there's different kinds of blame. There's the kind of blame that would render somebody legally culpable. But then there's also the kind of blame that we can use when it comes to taking responsibility for certain things. If you want society to be a certain way and you're not willing to take the steps that it takes, well, then part of the blame rests on you. And if I want society to be a particular way and I'm not willing to take the steps that it takes to get there, well, then part of the blame rests on me. I think that being unwilling to take responsibility for something that I want to see happen, or finding a way of blaming other circumstances as opposed to thinking, what could I have done differently, what could I learn, is it's stupid and pointless. You always got to be approaching things, but then you have to also do the thing where you forgive yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be so hung up on the bad decisions of the past and not forgetting them, or at least not, using them only for the purpose of learning the lessons you need to learn, that you wind up getting drawn back by a lot of the baggage. So there's a way of healthily, of associating with these things in a healthy way, and dissociating from all the unhealthy associations. But yeah, I would say that we should, or it would behoove us to take responsibility for having the kind of world around us that we want to have. What about people who are not cognizant about taking the blame themselves? Well, then I guess they're going to be losers their whole life until such a point as they wind up becoming cognizant about that, because as far as I understand, the only good that happens to these people is when they when they win the lottery. But even then, that's short-lived and doesn't happen to many people, and is a negative expected outcome. Buying a lottery ticket, that is. And that's another reason that I think that cause and effect should not be divorced from each other. Cause needs to follow effect. And children need to be able to see cause leading to effect. That's one of the most important things is during your formative years, to not be shielded from the natural consequences of your actions. I mean, of course, if you're going to kill yourself or something by doing something really, really bad, your parents should step in. But by and large, yes, people will always blame their parents for the psychological issues. Yes, very true. And that's why I think that, especially for adults, eventually it winds up being a case of them taking responsibility. And one of the best things that can happen to them is if they have the good parents that force you to take responsibility early. But then we can go and take that one step further, right? And I'm going to say I did have good parents, but my dad didn't. My dad did not have good parents. And so what he did is he decided, I want to have a different kind of life, and I want to be the right kind of a parent. And so he basically forced me into positions where I was forced to make good decisions, but I still wound up having the safety net of a family. So I learned in a safe, semi-controlled environment how to make decisions, but still had to deal with the consequences. Now, sometimes life will hit you like a sack of bricks if you've been shielded your whole time, shielded your whole childhood. But then ultimately how you deal with that is entirely up to you. When you go into the real world after having been shielded as a child, I've seen a whole bunch of people that crumble. But most of them wind up building themselves up by the time they're, late 20s, early 30s. And they wind up making a lot of really, really fast progress because there's no other choice. In a do or die situation, most people will go and do. Very few people will go and die. And those people are the kinds of people that often find themselves in self-destructive positions. Now, of course, I want to say that we can give people a helping hand, so don't go and twist that around. But I am saying that there's a general attitude thing that people need to go and say, like, okay, gotta do it, regardless of what anybody else says or thinks. But I think that we all can at least get to that point, or most of us that aren't mentally completely impaired can get to that point of understanding the importance of taking responsibility for our own lives. I really think that I think we can do that. Didn't see the iceberg sort of thing. And once you see enough icebergs, you learn. Once you see enough icebergs, you learn. Yeah, I'm not. I don't think that blaming your parents is I mean, maybe if you're a teenager, you can go and understand the impact that your parents had on you. Because not understanding that would just be stupid and naive. But blaming them for your decisions, that's not the right thing to do. The best thing you can do is probably go into a little bit of a dialogue with yourself and think, well, okay, if I was Bob, say, and Bob was exactly in my situation with everything about me being exactly the same as Bob, except for the fact that Bob is not me, what would I tell Bob? And put yourself into that position of caring for Bob. What would you tell Bob to do? Well, then go and do it yourself. And if people can go and just do that, just that little bit of nothing but dissociation from their life to be able to give themselves the advice that a caring person would give. And then to realize that, hey, I'm taking caring advice. I better follow this. People can grow up really fast. People can grow up really fast. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it is doable. I've seen too many people succeed from far less than optimal situations to be convinced otherwise. And on that note, I'm going to say I really hope for all of you watching that you have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope that I can provide something of value to you. And I thank you very much for interacting and throwing these difficult things to deal with at me. It's forcing me to articulate myself in these particular situations, I think, it's good for everybody. Because you get to deal with the hard truths of life, and sometimes, most of the time, just dealing with it is what we need. So, on that note, thank you, and see you next time. Talk to you later.